All right, guys. Tenant screening. Welcome back to the show. We're going to talk about screening tenants. One of the biggest parts of being an investor. If you don't screen your tenants, it can turn into a nightmare. So I've got Misty with me today, talking about how she screens tenants. Before we jump in, though, I just want to say, that we don't run ads or anything like that. So we only have one fee, and that's if you learn something or you enjoy the show. Please, share the show, leave us a rating, and whatever platform you're listening on. So. But let's jump into it. So, Misty, kind of tell us a little bit about your process for screening tenants. Like, what do you look for, when you start the process? I know you just went through a lot of leases and, you know, kind of start at the top.
Yeah, so basically we do the basic stuff, of pulling background, credit check, all
Mm,
that. We're looking, if they have anything negative in their background, any criminal stuff. Um, that also pulls credit checks to see, how their credit history is. And then it also checks for previous evictions, any bankruptcies, things like that. So depending on the applicant, they may have had a previous mortgage, or if not, sometimes if they like lived at apartments or things like that,
mhm.
if there was any balances owed, things like that, it would show up, as a rental or apartment debt.
So, how do you and this is some advice for any investors that are out there who like the do-it-yourselfers. What do you use in order to get that information?
There's a lot of products out there these days. One of the most common one that I hear about is TransUnion Smart Move.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one for them to do, and it gives them the options for either the tenant to pay for it
Hmm.
or the landlord or property manager to pay for it. So, if you want to charge extra for the application fees and then you just pay for it and then you get extra because it is kind of time consuming to do this tenant screening. You have that option, or you could just have them pay for it directly.
Yeah, I know when you do it, it actually gives you like a tenant score, right? Kind of go through that just on Smart Move. I mean, that's what.
Yeah, different programs have different things. Sometimes they actually pull the actual credit score, and others give them like a resident score or something. And so, based on which program you use, you need to find out what all that involves. But a lot of them will also give you a recommendation. Whether they recommend to approve or decline it. And then, you have all your other factors in place. Of course, definitely you need to go and do your references.
Yeah.
And so, talk to previous landlords and their employers and verify all that. And then, of course, get paycheck stubs.
Do you think a lot of people actually go and do all that, or most people just like, all right, let's take the money?
Depends on who it is. If they're first time landlord, probably don't know the entire process and they're just kind of winging it.
Yeah.
Um, and getting as much information as they can.
Do you find that some of the most time consuming part of what the actual process is, or the actual like placing a tenant?
Yeah, depends on the applicant. Some of them are ready to go and have all the information they need,
Hmm.
which I love those people. Other people, you have to ask for it like 4 times, and
Yeah.
and it's frustrating. It's like, "Ah, send me this," and then they send you one from like 2 months ago, and you're like, "No, you need your most recent." and and a lot of back and forth, or they have expired IDs, things like that. So it can be very time consuming going back and forth.
So, what are some for someone out there that's listening and they, maybe they're new to the game and they want to do some do it yourself. They want to be the do it yourself property manager, which I think we all get to that point at some point, especially when we first start. What are some of your red flags like that you look at? And you're like, oh God, that's horrible.
Well, of course, looking at the credit and criminal will tell you a lot.
Hmm.
But as far as employment and stuff, you want to make sure that they're able to give you documentation of what they make, because a lot of times they'll put on the application that they make this much,
Yeah.
and then you ask for proof of that, and their proof, it doesn't add up to the amount that they wrote down. So So you have to get proof of that. So sometimes they say, oh, well, so and so gives me such and such.
Hmm.
Well, that's not something that you receive on a regular, every
And
every month on the 15th or whatever. And it's just here and there.
in their head, they make 8,000, but on paper they make five.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a
So
minute.
so making sure that they have the income requirements. So that's one of the biggest things as a landlord is you need to have tenant screening criteria. What they can what they need, what you're basing your approvals off of. And so it's tenant selection criteria. And you need to have all that written out ahead of time before you have any applications. And that way everybody can review that, make sure that in their head they're like, yeah, I got this, I got that, I got that. Yes. Okay. Then I can make my application.
Yeah. So would you say you're weeding them out ahead of time? That way you're
Yeah.
not getting hundreds of applications and,
Yeah,
digging
it
through.
helps you only have ones that could qualify and not all these extra applications that are for no reason. And then it helps the tenant not waste their money or time on something that they'll never get approved for.
Yeah. You feel like, and I know you mentioned it, but the tenant screening is so important because it reduces the amount of evictions,
Yes.
right? That's the biggest part. It's that, was it uh, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think I said that right. Because it prevents evictions, right? I mean, you've. I know for you, I say it. I'm like, I'm gonna hold it here, knock on a little bit, knock on the table. You have been very lucky with all of your tenants and not having to go through all those crazy processes that you see on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because I mean, would you say a lot of that has to do with just the screening process that you go through?
Yeah, a lot of it's due to screening. When you look at people's history, it usually repeats itself. So
Yeah,
they take a look at the history, and if you're going to offset some of that, if you're willing to take more risk, then you need to have the funds there to back it up.
right.
So you can require 2 or 3 times security deposit or higher rent or something like that to help offset the riskiness.
Hmm.
So if you are going to make exceptions because you feel like it might be a good, just make sure you have the cash reserve.
Yeah. So maybe if you found, yeah, that makes sense. The double deposit and things like that.
Mhm.
But I mean, you guys, if you listen to the show, don't accept. At least our opinion is we don't accept the full 6 months worth of rent, 12 months worth of rent, that kind of stuff, because that puts
Yeah.
you in a bind.
Yeah. If you accept it ahead of time, then they have the right to stay there that whole time
Yep.
unless you're willing to refund it back.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Don't put yourself in that position. It's no fun. So the process is important. So you're looking at, I'm kind of getting thorough here with you. So, and just your process. So you're looking at criminal, right? So there's certain things. Now, just kind of talk a little bit of legality things here. Are there certain things you cannot look at and say, no, we won't accept? Or how does that work? Like, or how do you go about that if there's certain things you're like, that's not going to be acceptable for what we're doing? Is that something you kind of give in the front end by your criteria, or how do you do
Yes.
that?
Yes, by the criteria, it needs to say it ahead of time. Now, if you were to just put, you know, anything criminal, that's not, it's too broad.
Yeah.
So you might say no felony convictions or no violent felonies, within the past 10 years or something like that.
Hmm.
Be a little bit more specific or, um, of course, if, uh, yeah, just be specific
Up front,
up front.
basically. If
Yeah.
you do it up front, that way no one can be like, well, you're
And you
not.
can always talk through a situation with a prospective tenant ahead
Mhm.
of time. I mean, it doesn't cost anything to have the conversation.
So as a landlord, do you find, because I know you manage several different classes of properties. So do you find that in certain areas it's harder to find a knock it out of the ballpark kind of tenant where there's no criminal and great
Yes.
credit, and you're having to, I mean, is that,
Yes. You do see some. some degree of variance there. And
He's trying to keep it.
and so it's usually, I mean, it can be the same policy for all of the properties,
Mhm.
but you can also make them subject to just on this property, this is the screening criteria. And then on this property, so it could be per property. So anytime you have a listing and stuff, just make sure you're posting the right criteria.
Yeah. So how does that, I mean, like, just kind of go through that process of the application. I mean, do you, and you post, you mentioned about putting that information out. Do you post that on the, in MLS, like how to apply and that kind of stuff? I mean, I'm just kind of going through it, the
Mhm.
DIY or the DIY, excuse me, do it yourself, you know.
Yeah, on listings, anytime you do it, if it's going to be on the MLS and stuff, it should be up there in the transaction desk for the agents to see,
Hmm.
and they should pass that along to their clients so that they can make sure they qualify before they put in an application. And then if you're a landlord doing it on your own, some people put it on Zillow or however you advertise, that needs to be available as well. So anytime anybody inquires on the property, you need to make sure that they have that information. And a lot of people get them if it's not going through the MLS where it's already uploaded on there and stuff. A
Hmm.
lot of the applications either have that in there when they're doing the application, or if it's like an online or something, it'll be on the website page and before they start the application process.
Yeah. So, it's funny is obviously from going from, uh, not having a property management company to, us owning a property management company. I remember when we first were using property managers, and they're like, it's 75% of the first month's rent. And I look at you and I'm like, damn, she goes through a lot just for, to get those tenants in. And I know recently we'll talk about that in another episode. A lease that you would, a lease on a duplex that you were really hustling to get, full, and just sitting back and watching that, it's a lot. I mean, would you say that's probably, I said that's most of your time is that screening and going through and making sure, because if you place the wrong tenant for the landlord, right, or if the landlord places the wrong tenant, it's tons of headaches down the road. Is that not right?
Yes, yes. You can create a lot more work for yourself.
Yeah. So you're doing, when you hear that, if a property management says, management company is saying, I'm going to charge 75% of the first month's rent to, place somebody, there's a lot of work going in behind that.
Yes,
I mean,
yes. For all the applicants, you get tons of calls and questions, and a lot of people wanting to see the place. And if they're not being represented by somebody, then you got to schedule for yourself to go open up the house and show it to them
yeah.
and stuff. So a lot of time and energy goes into that process. Um, sometimes it's pretty lucky and you get it on the first or second person that inquires, but I would say depending on the property and the timing and all that, I mean, it could be, 100 people interested in the property at one
There's
time.
a lot of
So,
phone calls. I mean, I see you go through it, we at dinner and, your phone budding, budding. I'm like, Misty, we're eating dinner. It's Friday night. And you're like, I gotta, I gotta respond. I need to be
yep.
able to place this. And so, it's a lot of, so the do-it-yourself landlords, not saying don't, if that's what you want to do,
Hmm.
just always be prepared. If you're either getting into the business or you're going there, know that when it comes time to lease, it
Yeah, if you're doing
takes
it
time.
yourself, I would definitely recommend having open houses.
Hmm.
So having set times, because if you're like listing it on Zillow or something, you're going to have so many inquiries and everybody wants to tour it, right?
Right. And they're not all qualified either.
Yes. So first have a pre-qualification that they do. And if everything looks good, then, have 2 or 3 different times for the week already planned that you're going to be there for an hour or something.
Hmm.
And say, well, does this time or this time work best for you? And then line everybody up for the same time
Yeah.
during those 2 or 3 times for the week.
It's
And
competitive too. They walk in, they're like, "Oh snap, these people are looking too." And you're like, "By the way, this is the application process." Oh man, wait a minute, they're look. Oh man,
yep.
they're really all looking. It looks like 2020.
I
That
better
movie,
get this in
that
fast.
one house we walked in with with our buddy. We walked in. He was buying. They're looking to buy, and there were so many people in the
He's like,
house.
never mind.
We walked out. He said, "Never mind." He actually did. He put an offer on that? Are you sure?
Mm-mm.
I think they had like 50 offers or some craziness. I remember because the house was in Kennedale, and I remember walking in. And I was like, "This is a lot of people," and he's in there. And I remember we waited his wife to show up, and I'm like, man, like I was like, "This is crazy." So yeah, you set everybody up in there
Yeah.
where they're competing against each other in the tenant process, and they're like,
It helps speed up the process because
right?
they're like, if I want this, I get first. They're only going to apply if they're serious
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, I don't really care. You know, a bunch of other people here. Then they, if they're not serious, they're not going to apply. And then if they are serious, then they're going to get everything to you quickly because they know it can go fast.
Yeah. So I want to go through a
But it's also a good reason to do that because you'll have no shows. You'll have people
right.
that seem like that they're very interested and want to see it, and you schedule them. You don't want to drive an hour round trip for somebody to not show up.
Yeah. And they burn out.
So you stack them all in, make 3 to 10 appointments or something for the same time period. You're there for an hour. If 3 of them show up, then good.
Yeah.
Hopefully one of them 3 qualify.
Yeah. You put them against each other and speed the process up. So I want to ask you this. I want to go over this one with you because I know you just went through this recently on a screening, and kind of go through this. You start at the top. I'll lead you in, but start at the top. It was the individual who was older, and you thought, man, they're gonna be great. It's gonna be perfect. And you were like, I want to even I want to see this person. I'm curious to meet him. So how'd that screening turn out, or what was what's the story behind that?
Yeah, so I did some pre-qualifications, just I didn't pull background or credit check yet, just, because she hadn't officially applied yet, but I didn't want to totally waste my time by, showing up randomly and not knowing anything about this person. So I did verify she gets Social Security income, so her income requirement is met. And she, was an elderly lady, didn't have a car, so don't have to worry about a car payment. And just it was just her and a little dog moving in. So
It sounded good,
yeah,
right? You're like, yeah.
asked her a few qualifying questions. Everything was good. So then we go. She tours the place, likes it, wants to put in the application. So we go through that process. And the system we use actually came back as a recommend for her.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the other part of the screening process, which is verifying employment, which for her I didn't have to do because it was Social Security. I already verified that.
You think some people stop at this point? It says recommended, and they're
Yeah.
like, all right, cool, high five, let's move.
Yep. But I did verify landlord, so she lived at an apartment complex. And so I had called that complex and they answered the phone and I said, hey, I need to send over this landlord verification form.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I send that to? They gave me the email address because they didn't want to do anything over the phone. And I like it. I prefer it in writing anyway.
Yeah.
So I sent that over and I didn't hear anything. And she wanted to move in within the next few days. So I'm just keep calling back, and they won't answer their phone anymore. And haven't replied to my email. So I reached out via email again, and they weren't responding to that. I kept calling, they weren't responding. And I looked it up, and they were about a 20-minute drive from me. So I was like, forget it. I'm just going to drive over there.
Surprise, surprise,
So I
surprise.
drove over there with the form and her authorization. And I go into the office and I'm like, hey, I'm a property manager. Just need to get this form filled out for an applicant on one of our properties. And the manager there looked at me like I was crazy. And she's like, you're a property manager? I said, yes. And she's like, we've never had a property manager come to our office. And I just laughed. And, in my head, I'm thinking, well, maybe you should answer the phone or reply to your emails. And then we wouldn't have to.
She's like, I'm the first property manager.
And so I mean, it literally took all of 5 minutes for them to fill out the form and get it done. And yeah, so that the applicant did not pay their November rent
Mm,
or their October rent, and so they owed close to $3,000 to the apartments. And so that's why she wanted to move in quickly.
yeah.
And so,
They
yeah.
all want to move in quickly, I
Yeah.
noticed too. As you know, because this is one of your main areas. This is what you specialize in, at least within what we do is property management. And as I watch you, I'm like, and I have conversations and stuff. They all want to move quick.
Mhm.
Every single one. It's I want to move quick. When would you like to move? Tomorrow. Like why tomorrow?
Yeah, it's either like a month and a half out or in 3 days.
Yeah. So she wanted to move quick.
Yes.
So she
She
owed
wanted to move
3,000.
quick because she knew they were going to file on her pretty quickly.
And what did you end up doing? What was the ultimate result?
Yeah, she got declined.
Decline. I mean, but so the the program recommended says it's great. Go ahead. And if you
Mhm.
did it, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, that could go one of two ways. I mean, she could have just been like, I don't like this place because they don't fix things and stuff. So she could have just been withholding rent, trying to move.
yeah,
She's on a, gets paid Social Security. So she's on a set amount every month. And so maybe she's like, well, they don't fix things. I don't want to live here anymore. So I'm just going to save the money to go somewhere else. And she could have been okay.
yeah,
But just knowing that she does that or has done that means that she probably would do it again.
yeah, yeah.
So didn't
If
want to go down
she
that
was
route.
like, you're not fixing anything now, and this is not one of our properties.
No,
What you're doing this for a
an
client,
owner.
an owner. So you basically by doing that taking that extra step that someone else may or may not, whether it's a do-it-yourselfer or even another property manager, you actually you avoided a situation that could have been costly in the end, where somebody, because it's costing that apartment complex
Yeah.
in the end, right? I mean, the chances of her still there I mean, it's November, we're in November right now, and
Wonder if
this
she
was
got caught up.
she either got caught up or she got kicked out or she's still there. You know what I mean? And they got to call Ernie.
Running up the bill.
And they're calling Ernie Garcia. Ernie, we got an eviction. So yeah, I mean, you essentially avoided a lot of headache for the owner.
Mhm.
That could have been a costly deal. So that screening process is so important. Are there any other stories that you can think of that you've kind of come through that maybe that stick out in your head? Doesn't have to be like super wild, but something that
Well, I haven't dealt with it personally, but I'm part of landlord groups and stuff, and I see all the times where people are have submitted fake paycheck stubs,
yeah,
things like that. So of course, a lot of that going around. But just an extra step, of course, is that employment verification. Send that out, have it verified by the employer. Look up, Google the employer and actually get their address and phone number and stuff and see if it's matching up to what the tenants are giving you.
that way it's not the human fund from Seinfeld.
Yeah.
It's the human fund.
Donate to the human fund.
They work for the human fund. $20,000 to the human fund. George, we found out that the human fund is not real.
And then another way to kind of follow through with that verification is a lot of people get paid via direct deposit.
Mhm.
And so on their paycheck stubs, it'll show, deposited to account ending in 5432 or
Yeah.
something. And so then we ask them to provide those most recent bank statements from the account that ends in 5432 or whatever it was and match up the ACH credit
Yeah. You can know.
and make
See,
sure it's the same amount that's on the paycheck stub and from the same employer and have at least 2 months of that. And if they don't get direct deposit, you have their check advice and you can still generally what do they do with the check? Generally it gets deposited anyway, right? They
right.
just manually do it or do it via the app on the phone or something. But it should still show up on their bank statement. It
Yeah.
just might say deposit instead of where it's from.
Right. Right. Yeah. Any it just the importance of screening. I mean, that's something that I know it helps a lot. So I hope any advice you'd give to anybody as far as any other advice you give to someone that's a DIY, do it yourselfer. I always want to see DIY. The DIY is anybody that's stuff to pay attention
DIY.
to. DI is it
DIY.
DIY? Yeah,
Yeah.
do it DIY. I don't know. Do it yourselfers. I'm not a DIY.
Yeah, and just make sure you follow, what your criteria is, and make sure you get all of it.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you're asking, you send them an email and say, "Hey, I need you to supply me with this, 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 and this," and they only send one of them.
Yeah,
And so you got to keep going back and forth. And so just make sure that they get everything to you, because their application is not complete until you've received all their documentation.
right.
So you can still decline them if they're being in trouble, not getting you what you need.
Hmm.
Decline their application.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you can do that for even if someone what they sign the lease but they don't deposit any money
Hmm.
as well. If they
Yeah, don't take it off the market until they've paid their amount.
Yeah, if they haven't paid you anything, you can't take. There's no need to take it off the market. You leave it on there.
And it tells you that in a lot of the documents. If you're using the TAR stuff, it says, if you're doing the TAR lease, it says that this lease, until you pay your
Mhm.
security deposit to save this property, will still be continued to show.
Yeah, yeah. So if you want it, pay your money. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. So, well, that's awesome. So definitely great information. I hope any of the do-it-yourselfers out there hear that. And of course, if it know that you don't have to do it yourself. If you want someone else to take that over, you always can. So there's always property management companies that can do that as well. Not saying you got to contact us, but just saying in general, there's always someone out there that But I mean, do your due diligence as well too. But no, it does take time. I mean, like I said, I've just being a part of the process and going through it. It's funny because on ours, even though Misty's our property manager, she treats me like the owner. She'll go through everything and she'll be like, "All right, I got these applicants. Which one do you want?" And I'm like, I don't know. Tell me what we've got." And I go through, and I have my certain things that I don't, as an owner, that I don't want on the property. But not, I don't look at it as the eyes of the property manager. I look at it the eyes of what I don't want on the property and things that I don't want. So, um, I still get treated the same way. It's kind of funny because she doesn't really need me for ours. You could just place them, but you always like to ask me like, "What do you want?" So, why is that? You just do it for fun, out of curiosity?
Just to see if we have the same ideas.
Okay. 'Cause, do we usually have the same idea?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
we align
Good.
pretty well.
High five.
I guess that's why we're still married.
Is it now? Tenant selection has kept us together, right? Yeah, exactly. It's the only thing that's holding it together is tenant selection. If she had bad tenant selection, I'd have to get. We'd be in the divorce. We'd be seeing Judge Judy. Well, man, fantastic. I hope that gave out give some good advice to you guys. So whether it's do it yourself or hire someone, gives you a little more insight. Know that it's not just I think we got good at tenant selection on our own before we actually were doing it anyways. We were very particular, and I think we probably made one real screw up, and that was just that, taking the $7,000 because we didn't know. But other than that, I mean, I'm pretty particular. But also, we don't buy in sketchy neighborhoods either. So that because if you buy in sketchy neighborhoods, right? I mean, that helps. Yeah, that can give you a lot more issues because
It could, yeah.
you're gonna have maybe more criminal, more credit issues, and so you're having to pick between ones that you
Lower income.
lower income area. Yeah, so you're having to pick between ones that not. It doesn't mean any of the people are bad. Just saying if you look at it from a 30,000-foot view of just those particular items of the
Yeah, because
income, the credit, the
someone
background.
that makes 8,000 a month with a 850 credit score would
Mhm.
not choose to live in that area.
Right, exactly. But so, we don't buy in the lower income areas, so we don't really have to go through all that. But we do manage in some areas that, that you do have to really kind of work hard at to figure out. And I know Misty's had to really work hard to go, man, like racking your brain to figure out, which one's going to be the best. But in the end, I mean, it all works out. So, um, well, awesome. Anything you want to add there before we end it there? Any other thing you want to throw out there for some advice?
For those doing it on their own, of course, you can always hire a property manager to just do the leasing only.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to use one of those services to do credit and background check and all that, some of those services also offer employment and landlord verification as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't want to do the legwork of that, and most times if you hire a property management company to actually do all of that work for you, they'll charge like 100% of the first month's rent. But that 100% is well worth it
Mhm.
if you A, don't have the time, or B, you just really aren't sure what to look for.
they also write up the lease for you.
Yeah.
If you don't have your own specific lease you want to use, um, in Texas here, most of them will use the Texas Association of Realtors lease, which is a really good lease.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't have to have you don't have to use that lease. You can use your own lease. I know we had one lawyer send us a lease that was so long. Misty was like, "Oh my god."
I can barely get them to fill out an application, and you
Mm.
want how many pages?
Yeah, it was a lot of pages, man. It was like, "This is for you." I was like, "That's a huge lease." Was that a shallow house? That's a huge shallow house. Like, that's a huge bitch. That's a huge lease.
But just keep in mind that whatever you're paying, whether it be a property manager or an agent or something that is either managing or listing or just handling the listing of your
Yeah,
property, remember that they're usually paying out a tenant's agent as well. And
which
so
is
that fee is incorporated into whatever you're paying them. So, they don't make the full 100% or the full 75% because they're paying that tenant's agent 25%, 30%,
mhm.
40%, whatever they've agreed to pay them.
Yeah. In some areas it's more, some areas it's less. It just depends. But yeah, if somebody has to get it's an incentive to help. I know we deal with a lot of leasing. Even like our agents. That are in the brokerage that are in our brokerage. We teach a lot of leasing, and we do that on purpose. But they've got to get paid too,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, awesome guys. I hope that helped and give you some solid advice on what to do. And if you're going to do it yourself, or if you just don't want to deal with it, you can always hire property management to do the tenant selection and screening and all of that, and lease
Marketing.
marketing, and get your property rented out. So you guys have a good one, and we'll catch you guys next time.